Good morning, guys. Good morning. I know I'm a little perky on Monday, but I get excited about Mondays because it's the kickoff for the work week. Now, the week really actually begins for me on Sunday. So Sunday's kind of like my spiritual, emotional prep time, where I'm just recuperating and re-strategizing and just getting my head right, to start the week and to be successful in everything I do, being a father, a grandfather, a husband, a Christian, a man determined to lose this last 50 pounds, a counselor, a friend. I want it all. I want it all. And I believe we can have it all if we want it. And sometimes it's not just about just wanting it, it's about, are you committed to going on the path that you need to go through to get to the destination, the destiny that is your birthright. So, anyways, beyond my old emotional speech, I wanted to talk about numbing your pain and the miracle that happens when you stop doing that. And so this morning I was listening to Steve Furtick had a speaker on there. Man, I can't believe I forgot her name. I'll talk about it the next time. But it was on there, and she was talking about when it all falls apart. And I think her name was Sharon something. And the message just it just hit me, and tears just started coming out of my eyes, man. And I started to cry, and I just kind of laughed to myself at how easy it is for me to cry these days. When I see the things that are going on in our country, around the world, and the anger and the pain and the fear, it brings me to tears. But the thing that happens with that is that it brings me to prayer. It brings me to compassion and empathy, and I'm grateful for that because I didn't always have the ability to connect. I always had the ability to fake it and to be funny, but I was only connecting with people on a superficial level. I wasn't really connecting because I never let you really see my true face. And I think that's the role of, well, not just an addict, but of 90% of people today. A lot of us will easily look at addictions and say, okay, they're just numbing their pain. They're just escaping their reality. They're doing all these things to avoid feeling and growing. And it's not intentional. In the beginning it's not intentional. But it's easy to identify addictions, okay? I don't know anybody who doesn't know that crack isn't bad. I mean, crack is bad. Heroin, dope is deadly. I don't know anybody on this planet that doesn't know that. But do we know the other ways that our society has learned to numb their pain, to avoid the hurt? Yeah, I've been doing these videos on dealing with the uncomfortable truth and understanding who we really are and our place on this planet. Requires a fearlessness in educating ourselves. Eh, First, we got to humble ourselves to be educated. And so, what we've done in our society is we've learned so many tricks and distractions and ways to avoid going there, to avoid the heartache and the heartbreak and the intensity of intimacy. We've developed so many ways to avoid that with ourselves, not just with other people, but within ourselves. When I run into a new client or somebody and we're talking about wounds that haven't healed, they can identify it, but to actually go through and do surgery to heal from it is a whole nother process. And a lot of us have avoided that process. I mean, look at all the different ways we've learned how to distract ourselves from the truth of who we are. And I'll just use myself as an example. Because growing up, I was always the fat kid. Always got teased. Always dealt with loneliness and a terrible self-esteem, to where I was just hungry and starving for affection, attention, and love. And I would look for it in all the craziest places. But the problem was is that I wanted connection, but I was afraid to connect because I was afraid of being hurt. So I had this push pull thing going on. I would try to pull people closer at the same time push them away. And so through the agony of that, the emotional agony, I learned to numb my pain first and foremost with food. Food became my great insulator. And actually on a subconscious level, I wouldn't allow myself to truly get close to people because I was afraid they would reject me. Once all of my fat slimming layers of clothes came off, and so I always had that subconscious fear. So I would never let people get so close. And in fact, I would pick people that I knew wouldn't want to get that close to me. I mean, it's deep. Now, if you look at our lives, how many of us have created relationships like that to where we've it's almost like we've got property, and the property is expansive, and we've got acres and acres of property. But when people start to get a couple, 3, 4 miles close to our house, they'll start to see signs that say, "Do not trespass. Go no further. Enter at your own risk." And that's how it was with me. I would let people come onto the property so long as they didn't get close to the house. You could play in the yard all day long because it would be miles away from my heart, from my soul. And so looking at that, I mean, I developed all kind of tricks, and then I found alcohol and drugs, which was just a quick, easy way for me to just numb out, for me to, create that artificial warmth on the inside that I couldn't get from not connecting. I didn't want to connect, so I would connect with illegal substances to temporarily fill the void inside. And I see a lot of people who've done that. I mean, that's why I do what I do. Um, but I mostly do it not because I relate to the addiction. I relate to the loneliness and the fear. Because for anybody who's read my first book, my addiction wasn't a didn't would have probably never required the Narcan spray. I would have probably never ended up in jail. I would have lost more jobs, but it would have never been a 911 situation to where I had one of those dramatic stories of addictions. I was a classic casual user that was just destroying their life in a very subtle manner. People would have never realized that I was going home early just to drink and take my sleeping pills so I could just check out. I just wanted to sleep. I just wanted to go away. I wasn't suicidal. I was I was in had such a deep case of denial that and it wasn't just denial of my problems. I wanted to deny my life. I wanted to deny living in a different way. I didn't want to end my life. I just didn't want to live my life. if that makes sense. And I look at how many people out there have gone into this routine in their lifestyle, not because they're trying to make it, it's because they've checked out and they don't want to really live it. They just want to put it on cruise control. They take no more responsibility for going after their dreams, and they just become redundant, routine, recycling the same thing over and over and over again. And so when new information comes, it is immediately rejected with anger, bitterness, or fear, because it's going to wreck the routine that they have become used to. All the distractions of the superficial things that we have in our life have been used to numb ourselves from disappointment, from rejection. It's funny because I talked about it in some of my earlier videos about dealing with racism and how I had just gotten used to it, and not that I've encountered it as much as I did when I was younger, but the reason I haven't encountered it is because I've learned to maneuver in areas that I'm safe, and that's what happens with a lot of us. Once we've encountered rejection, pain, heartbreak, we learn to maneuver within the dysfunction to prevent further disappointment. So it's not that we've gotten better. We've just gotten better at being undercover, at working within the disease, so to speak. It's like a functional addict. They learn how to work and create a routine that supports their sickness. Now, what's scary is when people do that and they don't have a drug or alcohol addiction. They've just been they've just become addicted to mediocrity, and even mediocrity is probably an understatement, because there are significant issues within. All right, let me give an example. I remember a friend I talked to a long time ago, and it was dealing with relationships. Um, and there were significant issues with their significant other that they were professing their love to. You know, they had their partner had some narcissistic tendencies, and they and this is probably in the beginning. This is where I first learned that some people have made peace with their problems, and it is not my. I don't have the right to wreck it if that's where they want to live. Does that make sense? So, my friend I was talking to, and it was probably like 15 years ago, had made peace with being with a narcissist, and they were miserable, but they were only miserable if they identified it. So that person had created these delusions, self-deceptive ways to not acknowledge what was going on, and it takes talent to do that without drugs or alcohol. Most of my people who are struggling in a situation, I mean, phew, it's easy. We're gonna go drink. We're gonna go take some pills. We're gonna do some dope, whatever. We're checking out the easy way. But for people who don't go into drugs or alcohol, they have to go through so many mental and emotional hoops and tricks and calisthenics to create that illusion to and they have to do this in order for them to survive emotionally, because their soul is dying, because the environment is so dysfunctional and miserable. You either have to adapt to it or die in it or get out. And every last one of those options is going to require pain and how you deal with it. I remember somebody had said, one of my trainers had said, there's two pathways of pain. There's the pain of being obese and unhealthy, where you have to pay for your medication for high blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol. Your back hurts, everything hurts, your self-esteem suffers, and there's the pain of living with that. And I'm very familiar with that. Then there's the pain of changing everything. Your addiction to sugar, butter, fried food, fast food, your fear of being healthy, the pain of working out and making your body do things it's never done before, embracing the cologne of Ben Gay, learning how to breathe on the treadmill when you put it on the incline. All that stuff is painful. But that pain of breaking free from your dysfunction leads to life and actually living. But you cannot underestimate that journey, because the deeper you're in the forest, the deeper you're in the valley of death, the more painful it is to get out. But that pain is worth it. So when I stopped numbing my pain with food, drugs, and alcohol and sex, I think I had them all. Had them all. I developed this ability to be intimate that I never knew existed before. I developed this ability to tune in to other people's pain and be able to relate, and I didn't have that before. I developed this ability to be able to cry with other people and let people cry. I developed this fearlessness with disappointment and heartbreak that I never had before, because I knew it wouldn't kill me. I developed this ability to truly forgive people because I could forgive myself, because I was no longer hiding from my own disappointments. I understood them and was able to forgive them. And I tell you, I know in my first book, and I hardly ever talk about it because it's still painful. But in my addiction, I was I was very narcissistic, and it was all based out of my loneliness. And I remember my grandfather was in the nursing home, and he was dying, and I was named after him. And everybody would take turns visiting him, and I would often find ways out of it. And even back then, even back in my most selfish phase in my life, I still had the ability to bring light. And my mom always said that Grandpa loved when I came to visit, and I was one of the few people that he could remember my name, knew who I was. And I would often blow him off and not go visit. And then he died, and it's funny because, I know we don't really talk about, how I was back then. Um, but my mom was so mad at me that she didn't want to give me the watch that was Grandpa's, that was meant for me. She didn't give it to me in the beginning because she was so disappointed and angry with me. And I just went back to just drinking and going to bed early, taking my sleeping pills. I was going to bed at like 5 or 6 o'clock. Couldn't wait for the day to end, and I wouldn't think about it. I just didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to feel it. But now I look at that time as a lesson that I learned that people are precious and time is precious and everything we do does matter. And so that's one of the miracles for me when I stop numbing my pain. So I hope this message made sense. I hope I wasn't just rambling or babbling. Um, and if you like this channel, please subscribe because I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. All right. So I love you guys. Keep me in prayer. And like I said, it's Monday. It's the best day of the week. Talk to you later. Peace.